Hello and welcome to the Mr. Fiscal web series. This is the first of a series of 5 short, applicable personal finance presentations created by family physicians for family physicians and specifically with resident doctors in mind. They are intended to be a user-friendly, pragmatic introduction to finances for young doctors. My name is Rachel Carpenter and I'm a family physician. Today I'm going to start off the series with our money management discussion, which will discuss some foundational information that will set the stage for our upcoming talks. First, let's talk about what we'll be covering today. By the end of the session, participants will be able to do 4 things. First, we'll be able to identify how to create and utilize an effective and sustainable budgeting strategy. Second, we'll define net worth and explain how it impacts financial goals. Third, we'll prioritize financial goals and apply them to current finances. And lastly, we'll use the first 3 objectives to create personalized short and long-term financial goals. So before we get started, there's a few disclosures and disclaimers for us to talk about. Now you'll hear these at the beginning of every single Mr. Fiscal web series. We have no financial relationships with any commercial interest related to the content of this presentation, and similarly, we have no conflicts of interest to report. The views and opinions expressed in this series belong to the authors, and they don't represent the companies we work for. Similarly, the presentation does not represent the Department of Defense or the U.S. government. Again, we are family physicians and not financial experts. These presentations contain general financial information and do not pertain to every unique situation. We encourage all people to do their own independent research prior to making any financial decisions. Okay, so let's get started. So you may be asking, why should I watch this web series? So here's a little bit of background or some perspective. Family physicians, on average, make over $200,000 a year. So although we aren't the highest paid specialty, this still puts us in the top 2 to 3% of earners in the US. Despite this, 1 in 3 physicians age 50 and up are, quote, very concerned about having enough money to retire. And 2 out of 3 physicians still have debt in their 60s. 1 in 2 physicians only feel somewhat or not very knowledgeable about personal finance. And 1 in 5 physicians only visit their finances every few years or when the need arises. Now, these statistics pertain to physicians in general. Family physicians specifically have the lowest net worth of all the specialties. And we have the second highest percentage of doctors still repaying their student loans, second only to emergency medicine. But why is this? If doctors make so much money, why aren't we doing better financially? Well, there's a few reasons for this. I like to put them into 2 big buckets or 2 big categories. So one reason I'm going to call the big squeeze, which essentially means our debts are increasing, but our paychecks aren't. So the average in-state tuition for public medical schools is close to $35,000 per year, and we have high unsubsidized interest rates, typically around 6.8%. Simultaneously, inflation-adjusted physician salaries are decreasing. Now these are things we don't have a lot of control over. But the other set of reasons we do have control over. Physicians are notorious UAWs in the world of finance. The term comes from a great book called The Millionaire Next Door. A UAW is an underachiever of wealth. This means that you accrue less wealth than is expected considering how much money you make. But why is this? So first of all, we get a late start on savings since we spend many years in school and training. Secondly, there are also high expectations placed on physicians. Society portrays physicians as rich, and many of us feel the pressure to walk the walk, sending our kids to private school, having a nice house, going on good vacations, etc. Thirdly, we don't save enough. We underestimate how much money we should be putting aside. Fourth, we are unfortunately easy targets for bad investments and policies. Insurance companies and advisors know the doctors are busy and generally bad with money, and they take advantage of this. This will be addressed in a lot more detail in our risk web series. Lastly, we are busy people, and especially residents. We feel like we don't have time to learn about finances. Some people may stop me right there and say, I didn't get into medicine for the money, I became a doctor to help people, and I'm going to make plenty of money. I get it, it's not all about the money. However, there's a quote from this really great op-ed about doctors and finance that kind of puts it all together for me. And that's that, yes, we are privileged to practice medicine, but we need to learn some basic tenets of finance so we can make our money work for us, so we can work smarter and not harder and focus on the things that really matter to us, both professionally and personally. So now that we're all in agreement, let's talk about how to be money-savvy doctors. The first step is budgeting. Now, budgeting sounds really terrible to some people, but it doesn't have to be. Budgeting is really just spending your money with intent. And budgeting starts now in residency, so you can start saving for retirement and paying off your debts. You may say that you don't have enough money to do these things, but chances are you probably do. The average resident salary is spot on equal to the median American outcome. If you can't start implementing these habits now, chances are that you never will be able to. That means budgeting and saving starting now, at least getting into the habits. At the very least, don't accrue credit card debt. Live within your means. In order to budget, you first have to know where your money is going, or knowing what you spend. So this can be as simple as pen and paper, or it can be an Excel sheet. Personally, I find that to be labor intensive, and I prefer to use apps and websites to make my life easier, but everyone's a little different. Mint.com, which also comes as an app, is my favorite option because it's free, you sync your accounts, and then it tracks and categorizes all your expenses. Super easy. Spendy is a very similar app. It does the same thing. It's also free and it has great reviews. There are tons of other options out there too, but a lot of them cost money. Quicken, some people may be familiar with. It's been around for a long time. It does cost money, but you're welcome to look into it. All of the links that I mentioned in my presentation will be found below the video in the comment section in case you want to check them out. Now, once you know where your money is going, you can use this knowledge to spend your money with intent, prioritizing money according to your goals. This too can be done in several ways. So the classic way to do this is the money in the envelope system, where you put cash into envelopes for certain expenses, such as clothing or entertainment, and when that money is gone, it's gone. And this is typically used for more of the non-essential type expenses. The rest of the money goes towards savings and retirement. There's also several apps that work on the same concept. So Good Budget does the same exact thing, but it's an app. Again, Mint and Spendy do the same thing, but they track and budget, which is really nice, and they're free. So these can be preferable for most people. However, some people hate doing all this nitty-gritty budgeting, and I'm one of them. I'm a proponent of the pay yourself first, which essentially means you calculate how much money you can put towards savings or debts every month, and you do this first before you even touch your paycheck. That way you're able to self-regulate, meet your goals, and still have some financial flexibility. Play with it a little bit, figure out which method or which hybrid of systems kind of works the best for you. So budgeting starts now and it continues throughout your entire life. But before you know it, you'll be done with residency. You'll be making 3 to 4 times what you're making now. If you can continue these good budgeting habits, you will be able to make substantial strides on your financial goals in a short amount of time. If you remember one thing from this talk that will put you ahead, remember to live like a resident. So after you graduate, for the first few years, live like a resident. This means grow into your income slowly. You can still enjoy life, but don't expect your lifestyle or spending to triple or quadruple right after graduation. If you do this within 5 years of residency graduation, most people will be able to have student loans paid off, catch up on your retirement account, buy your dream home, and have no debt aside from a 15-year low APR fixed mortgage. So let's start off with kind of a simple workable example. This is average Joe, and he just finished residency and he accepted a job that pays $210,000 per year. It doesn't offer any kind of bonus or student loan repayment. He does have about $200,000 in student loans. So this is a pretty average scenario. With that salary, he'll pay about $40,000 in taxes, which will leave him $170,000. He gives himself a 50% raise, so he's able to spend $75,000 a year in living expenses. So for him, he's living considerably better than he does in residency, and he is feeling pretty good about that. He still has $95,000 a year left over, and he's really smart. There's different ways you could prioritize your money goals, but this is the way that he picked, and it makes a lot of sense, and we'll talk about this more in detail towards the end of this discussion. He puts almost $36,000 towards retirement. So he maxes out his 401k, puts $18,000 there, puts $5,500 each year towards his Roth, and the same to his spouse's Roth, which is also maxing it out, and also maxes out his workplace HSA or health savings account, $6,500 a year. He then puts $40,000 towards student loans each year and still has $20,000 left for a down payment each year. So let's fast forward 5 years. Average Joe will have over $200,000 in retirement, he'll have no student debt, and he'll have $100,000 saved for a down payment. I think we can all agree Average Joe is doing pretty well. In addition, though, he has done some really smart things along the way. He has made his money work in a tax and interest advantaged way for him. So for example, by saving so much in his 401k, he'll save $30,000 in taxes. We'll discuss this a little bit more in our 5th web series, but essentially maxing out your workplace pre-tax retirement account is the best tax advantage you have as a physician, and you should definitely take advantage. By paying off his student loans in 5 years instead of 10, he'll save $40,000 in interest. Now, say we were to take this a step further, and he were to have refinanced his loans from a 6.8% 10-year loan to a 3.5% 5-year loan, he would save an additional $18,000, so a total of $58,000 in interest. So something to think strongly about. Again, there's some links below to check out. And lastly, with his $100,000 down payment, he decides to put 20% down on his dream home, his $500,000 dream home. He decides to do a low rate 15-year mortgage instead of a 30-year mortgage. By paying off his mortgage more quickly, 15 instead of 30 years, he's going to save himself $175,000 over the course of the loan. So just things to think about. So it appears that Average Joe is making his money work smarter, not harder. And it looks like he's doing well, but is he wealthy? What is his net worth and why do we care? Net worth is a way of looking at your overall financial health. Often when people discuss wealth, they're actually talking about net worth. Mathematically, net worth equals assets minus debts, which is also known as liabilities. So on the left, you can see things like your checking, savings, retirement accounts, and home value are considered to be assets, while everything in red, all of these debts and loans, such as credit card debt, student loans, and mortgage, are considered to be liabilities or debts. So let's calculate Average Joe's net worth. So let's say he has $10,000 in checking and savings. We already know he has $200,000 in retirement, and the house he just bought is valued at $500,000. So his assets total $710,000. We already know that he has no credit card debt or student loans, and we know that his mortgage is $400,000 since he put $100,000 down. Let's say he splurged and he bought a car, and now he has a $20,000 car loan. So his liabilities or debts are equal to negative $420,000. $710,000 minus $420,000 is $290,000. So his net worth is $290,000. Okay, well, what does this number mean? Is it good? Is it bad? A useful way of thinking about this is something called the EPNW, or Expected Physician Net Worth. This is sometimes known as the Physician Net Worth Rule. By inputting your salary and years in practice, you can easily calculate what your net worth should be and compare it to what it actually is. This formula is great because it is useful for our special circumstances as a physician, which is that we're finishing training late and with a lot of debt. So we'll take the example of Average Joe again. His expected net worth at 0 years or at residency graduation is calculated to be negative $200,000. So this makes sense, right? We don't expect him to have accumulated a lot of assets, but we would expect him to have debt. So even if his net worth is negative $200,000, he's right where he should be. Now we'll recalculate it, expected physician net worth at 5 years, and he's calculated to have an expected net worth of $139,000. Now we already know, has a net worth of $290,000. So Average Joe now knows that he is ahead of the curve in terms of his expected net worth. So using the EPNW, or expected physician net worth, is a great way to set and track long-term goals. Average Joe has decided to input the calculation for EPNW into an Excel spreadsheet and also places the actual net worth in the spreadsheet. From there, he can quickly calculate out what his expected physician net worth is at different points in time in his career and really quickly and easily compare it to his actual net worth. If this is something you're interested in doing, and I really recommend it, the Google Sheet net worth at the bottom in the comment section is something you can play around with and input your own numbers into. So we've covered a few things so far. We've talked about the importance of budgeting, figuring out where your money goes first, and then putting the extra money towards financial goals. We've also discussed the enormous advantages to growing slowly into your post-residency salary so you can put yourself into an excellent financial position really quickly. So now you may be asking yourself, how do I prioritize my many goals? I'm going to pay myself first, but where should the money go first? So we'll talk about how to prioritize these goals. So the following is not a one-size-fits-all list, but is an excellent way to conceptualize your overall financial goals. Consider writing this list down and referring to it anytime you are figuring out your financial goals, starting now and continuing long term. These will be discussed more in the debt and retirement web discussions, but this is a way of putting it all together and sort of getting a foundation. We don't have time to go into the exact order and why for all the reasons, but they are ordered in a way that the most pressing or advantage priorities are at the top. So these first 4 goals are your highest set of priorities. So do these first and do these in this order. This is starting now and working your way down long term for the rest of your life. So very top goal, if your company offers a match, take the match. Take full advantage of this. Otherwise, you are literally leaving money on the table. This is typically offered in conjunction with a pre-tax account, such as a 401k or a 403b. Next, pay off high-interest debt, which we're going to define as debt with an APR greater than 7%. So typically, this is referring to credit card debt and some automobile debt. Third, fund your personal and spousal Roth IRA and max these out. So later, if you make over the highest contribution limit, you can do a backdoor Roth IRA, which will be discussed in more detail during the 5th web lecture, the one on retirement and savings. This is considered to be post-tax money, which means it'll grow in your retirement account and you'll be able to withdraw it tax-free. After this, 4th, maximize out those tax-deferred retirement accounts that you started contributing to in step 1. So again, examples are 401k, 457, or 403b. They're typically offered through the workplace, and as discussed, they decrease your income tax substantially. So these are your second set of goals, and these can be reordered in any way that makes the most sense for you and your family. So the first thing we'll talk about in this second set of priorities, or this next tier, is funding an HSA or health savings account. If your company offers an HSA, this is something to really look into and think about. So how it normally works is you and your company both put money into an account that can be used for healthcare expenses. So from there, you can essentially use it like a retirement account. It grows in the stock market. It's not taxed. And if you use it for healthcare dollars, either now or down the line, it's never taxed. However, if you decide you don't need it for healthcare expenses, then you can take it out and it's just taxed when you take it out. But essentially it works like another retirement account. Funding a college 529 will also be discussed more in the 5th lecture series, but essentially it is a college savings plan that has some really nice tax advantages as well that can be taken out for anyone with educational goals. Typically, people do it for their children. The other option in this set of priorities is to save for a house down payment, if that's applicable to you. And also in this set of priorities is to pay off moderate interest debt, which we're going to define as 4 to 7% APR. This will be discussed a lot more in the debt lecture, but briefly, start making a plan for your student loan payoff. This is really important for second and third years looking at jobs. Some, but not all jobs will offer repayment. Other considerations are forgiveness and refinancing. If you're going to take a job that does not offer loan repayment or you don't anticipate forgiveness, I would highly recommend that you do some kind of private loan consolidation, pay off your loans faster and at a much lower interest rate. I mentioned earlier in the presentation a group called SoFi. The link is below. They're a really great company with a really good reputation. So once you've accomplished everything in your first and second set of priorities, you can move on to your third set of priorities, which can also be reordered in any way that makes sense for you. It usually takes a little while to get here, usually a few years after residency, and that's okay. You're usually doing pretty darn well once you get here. So some options for you. You can add additional funding to your 529. You can invest in taxable account and risky investments. You can pay off low interest student loans. So this is that 1 to 3% area. And then if you've gotten everything in your first, second, and third set of priorities, you can move on to your last set of priorities. So you can make extra payments on your mortgage. You can invest in taxable low risk investments. These are all fine if you want to. This is essentially the cherry on top, but this is really where the fun comes in. Spend money on what makes you happy. Now, all along, you've been enjoying your life, but now you can buy that boat or that second home or take that fancy vacation because now you've put yourself in a really excellent financial position. So lastly, let's talk about short and long-term goals. This is really just putting it all together and personalizing everything we discussed to you and your financial situation. Just like everything else in life, goals are more likely to happen when you write them down. So write them down. Make them specific and realistic, and make a plan. Make both short and long-term goals and follow up your goals at regular intervals. And then you can bask in the feeling of accomplishment when you complete your goals. So here are some examples. So a short-term goal would look like this. In 2018, I will contribute $3,500 to my 401k. I'm going to do that by automatically contributing 6% of each paycheck, so I don't even have to think about it. But I will recheck on it at the end of the year and make sure that that money has come out and I have accomplished my goal. A medium-term example would be that I want to pay off my student loans in 5 years by 2023. I'm going to accomplish this by refinancing to a 5-year low-interest plan and paying monthly. And I'm going to refinance in 2018, next year. A long-term goal would be something like I want $1 million net worth by age 40. And I'm just going to start off with baby steps. I'm going to create an Excel sheet to calculate this. I'm going to look at my retirement accounts, see how practical this is, and I'm going to follow up on that regularly to make achievable small goals along the way. So that brings us to the conclusion of our money management web lecture, which again is the first of 5 web lectures by the Mr. Fiscal Collaborative. So just to wrap up a few things that we talked about today, we talked about the importance of creating a budget to allow you to start saving now and to put a good financial plan in place so that after residency, you keep living like a resident and then you get ahead of your finances fast. Next, we talked about using your net worth as well as your expected physician net worth to gauge your long-term progress. We also talked about prioritizing your goals in a tax and interest advantaged way, with the top priorities of getting the match, paying off high interest debt, and then funding your Roth. Lastly, we talked about mapping out a plan for your goals and reassessing regularly. Now, if you'd like to do some extra reading, which I would highly recommend reading 1 financial book a year, I would start off with The White Coat Investor and The Millionaire Next Door. These are both excellent, easy to read, short books that provide great foundational knowledge. There's also some really good hyperlinks and physician finance blogs out there, but The White Coat Investor, both the book and the website, are probably the best place to start. Well, that brings us to the end of our money management lecture.
I'd like to take a second to introduce you guys to the Mr. Fiscal Collaborative, who have created this web series. Again, my name is Rachel Carpenter, and you'll find my email below. I welcome all questions and comments. I hope you guys had fun today. I know I did. Please tune in next time. Dr. Scott Kellner will be leading an excellent discussion on credit management.